I have not been to Minnesota in probably 20 years.
Bring your ass.
These guys survived the David Kahn era of Timberwolves basketball and live to tell about it. It's Flagrant Howls.
It's everybody's favorite Timberwolves lifestyle podcast here. Phil Mackey, our guy Kyle Theige. And for one last time to recap an incredible season, our guys Michael Grady and Jim Petersen jump into Flagrant Howls. Gentlemen, thank you for joining here. How's your last week been? Are you? I woke up one night just sort of sweating and like murmuring "Wolves in 9" to my wife. Wolves in 11. Just keep bringing the games. How have you sort of digested the season these last few days? We'll start with Grady.
I mean, it's kind of hard to describe because on one hand, you're down about the end of the season. On the other hand, you're down, and this is connected. The ride is over. I wasn't doing as much work the last two rounds as I was in the first round and during the regular season, but still that abrupt ending to the season, you kind of wake up that next morning and I don't know what to do with myself. You know what I mean? I'm thinking about what just transpired with the team. I'm thinking about, okay, what's next? And so it's just kind of this weird transition where I'm a little bit like a zombie, walking around, don't really want to consume too much media. And so it's just kind of a weird space, and it takes a handful. I don't know that I'm completely out of that daze just yet, but it takes a little bit before I snap out of it. I'm like, oh, okay, let's get to regular life.
Yeah. Jim P., what about you, man?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of experience in the end of the season coming and don't have a lot of experience with the ride that we were just on. And all that implies too, because, you know, when you get into, it's one thing making the playoffs, but when you start getting into the conference finals, you start getting into and seeing more national media. It's more of a, you know, Michael and I were asked to do a lot more stuff, doing interviews. So there's more of a media crush, and you're talking more about your team than you ever have. And you're proud of it too. Like, you're proud of your team. There's a lot of things for us to be proud of. And so it's kind of like, I got to like talk about my kids or something, you know what I mean? It's like, it was just like, you guys know, Kyle, cause you do it all the time. And so when it all comes to an end, and then, you know, you spend so much time. I mean, like, we spend so much time on planes and buses and hotels and games and high leverage situation with the trainers and the coaches and all the support staff and the PR department and the flight attendants, and just, you see them all the time. You're always, and so it's like this intense like thing that just all of a sudden now, boom, now we're not going to see him for the most part for 5 months, right, Michael? It's just and that's why I say, you know, there have been plenty of years, obviously, when we did make the playoffs, and when you're finished with the 82nd game, if it's on the road and you take that last road trip, it's not goodbye. It's, hey, see you later, because those 5 months tend to fly by. I mean, it seems like it's never going to end, but those 5 months fly by, and all of a sudden you're back in the saddle again. So I know it's, you know, I really missed calling games with Michael. Working with Horton was just, you know, I just love Alan Horton because, you know, we've been together, and anybody that's been around the Wolves knows how great Alan is. But working games with Grady is just so fun. And, you know, I can't tell you like how grateful I am. Like, he is so magical with that camera that he has. He's got this magical camera that can take pictures every 5 seconds. So we have all these great shots that he shares with me. And, you know, I just don't have many friends that, like, you know, that take pictures on the road. That's one thing that, like, over the years, we have not had pictures taken on the road or during the game or whatever as much. And Michael's just chronicled all this stuff. So I'm grateful to him. And we are actually having dinner tonight later on, so I will see him. And hopefully when we make it a point to see each other often this summer. So we'll check in with each other. At least we'll have that part of it, you know. So
100%.
Yeah.
Grady's spot on though, because, you know, May was a grind, and it was way more of a grind for you two than it was for me. But I think I did 32 podcasts in 31 days, and that's 32 podcasts more than people sometimes need. But I kept thinking like, oh man, I can't wait maybe for the season to be done, hopefully mid-July, or June, but I need a break. And then to Grady's point, I woke up that Friday morning after they were eliminated, and I was like, what do I do with my hands? Like, what do I do now? Like, the break has come, and what do I do? So I'm already excited for draft stuff and summer league. But yeah, I just think it was important for Phil and I to have you on to thank you for being on these pods all year, because that's a lot of extra work, but also just thanks for all you did calling the games and taking photos and everything you posted, because to me and Jim, we've talked about this a lot. This will go down as the best season in my 35 years of being a fan. I know there was another really successful season, but it meant more this year to me because of the community that we have with you and the fans and all that stuff. So I'm excited to see what happens after, the best season in Timberwolves history.
Can I add, I was texting Kyle after they won game 4 and extended it. And it was fun just on social media or on these podcasts. 2 different things that were fun. One, speculating on, can they be the first team? I mean, there was genuine belief that if anyone's going to do it, this is the type of team that might have a chance to do it. But then the other thing, and Jim kind of brought this up, where you're like, it's this dopamine hit, man. Like, you guys are doing national media stuff. You're talking about your team. The arena's packed. There's block parties. And winning game 4, I texted Kyle. I said to my wife, I just want one more hit of it. Like, I just want to walk back into Target Center one more time and hear the pregame trumpet medley and, the arena rocking with 18,000 people. And if they lose game 5, then okay, then at least we got that one last hit. But the good news, I think, is it feels like, because Anthony Edwards is 22, it feels like the beginning of something. And I don't want to take it for granted, and I don't want to wish time away, as, Jim Petersen has said on this podcast, but it does feel like, knock on wood, this is the start of maybe more of these runs and maybe even deeper runs. What do you guys think of, like, what is the legacy of this season in your minds, Grady?
It remains to be written. I think, to your point, this could certainly be the beginning of something, but time will have to tell that story. I see why you feel that way. It's why I feel that way. Jim, we've talked about it. Why we feel this way about this squad is because you have a 22-year-old and Anthony Edwards, who is genuinely special and built different. And I saw what Get Up on ESPN was talking today about who will have the better 10 years, Luka Doncic, Victor Wembanyama, or Anthony Edwards. And so to even on the national media, to bring the Timberwolves into the conversation in terms of how dominant could this team be over the course of the next 10 years says something about the season that we all just witnessed. And I think it's great to have Tim Connolly back in the fold, and hopefully eventually that's a long-term thing. But with him making the decisions and the great staff that he has with him, and the coaching staff that we have and the young pieces that we have, there's no reason not to believe that this could be something that could continue long term. That said, the West is a dog, right? That's the other element to this too. We could have a really successful run and still for a period of time fall short of the dream because of the quality opponents that you have in the West. 3-time MVP Nikola Jokic. Luka Doncic is 4 wins away from his first NBA championship. There are other teams that, of course, that are going to be in the mix, and the list goes on and on and on, who are going to be hungry to win a championship. So that said, you're in the mix. You're in the mix because, Jim, you have one of those guys.
Yeah, and that's what I said, when Michael, we do the block party, and, we were just, really there as hype men for the game. And,
get up, everybody get up.
I know. And Michael, was so great because he's got that, he was the in-arena host in Indiana before he was the announcer in the arena. So he had this whole body of work of hyping the crowd. Let me hear your crowd. He's doing all this.
Had to dust that off.
Who wants a free T-shirt? Let's go.
Yeah. Everybody loves a free T-shirt, man. Oh my God. But anyway, it was a little bit embarrassing, but I'm, because I sat there and promoted the "Why Not Us" concept, and that was Finchie's mantra kind of all season, is "Why Not Us," and I kind of was saying "Why Not Us" come back from 03, and then we had the game that we had. I'm sure a lot of people are saying, where's that why not us now, Jim Pete? But
It's just a big fat head of Luca actually yelling, "Who is crying now, MFers," to whoever was sitting behind Snoop Dogg. That's
but it's still, I really, we can't be fans and we can't really believe in our team unless we're willing to put ourselves on the line like that. Right. And so I was willing to do that just because I had a belief of really, why not us? Like, why couldn't this team do that? I just didn't realize Luka Doncic was going to go nuclear like that and start hitting 4-point shots. I mean, what he did was ridiculous. Going under screens the way Ant and Kyle and other people did, during that barrage, and he just was hitting 31 footers like it was nothing. Unbelievable. But no, I'm thankful that Tim's going to be signed on for another year. We got that kind of settled. I was kind of hoping that Tim and Finchie would get extended out to match up with Ant, and we kind of put this whole thing to bed because this team actually isn't in place, with guys signed to their contract extensions to be in pretty good shape. So you're kind of wondering, and articles about Kyle were kind of heartbreaking a little bit because, not sure we're going to have the money to sign Kyle back again, but the story of his son and, going through the autism stuff and then finding a home here in a community for their son to flourish in, because, Minnesota is great, from that standpoint. There's a lot of resources here in the state, and you kind of you kind of hear those stories and you kind of want, because I want Kyle to be, I don't know how you guys feel, but I would love for Kyle Anderson to be a part of this community still, because I think he still has a lot to add.
I mean, that was like a sub story that made this all so much more fun, right? Britt Robson always talks about how great the locker room was this year to be in, and that's not always been the case. Jim, that dating back many years, that it was just a really good group of guys. And not only were they individually good guys, but they all seemed to, I remember in Portland when they were here for those 2 games, after one night, Kyle and Rudy setting up this big dinner that they were going on with their spouses or their partners. And to think back a year ago, I don't know if Kyle and Rudy were going out to dinner, especially after that one night. So for them to kind of grow and just the relationships, it was just another reason why I thought this team was so fun to cheer for. But I got to ask, because Phil, it's the last day of school kind of for this group. So before everyone goes out to summer vacation, Grady, I'll start with you, but Jim, chime in as well. A favorite memory moment from this past season, maybe something we don't know, or a call or a moment on the court that will kind of stick with you, I guess, forever?
Oh, well, I mean, forever.
That was deep. I know. I was thinking of another Grady concert.
Well, no, because I was going to go another direction. As far as my favorite game, or at least close to a game, what will stick with me forever, of course, will be the dunk and the block, right?
Yeah.
And so I do have to say that. But for me, and if I give it more time, there'll be others that'll jump out. There were so many different moments. But given, my time in New York and even in Indiana, I didn't really care for Boston either. But when I was in New York, first playoff game I was able to call was a loss to the Celtics. My last year in Brooklyn, I was swept by the Celtics. I don't like Boston. We had a you remember that jump ball, Jim, when Al Horford was doing weird stuff last year? And that was a game that we could have won and lost that game.
Mazzulla came down and ran all the way in front of us.
Mazzulla ran on the court. And I just, it was a whole lot. And I say this from a friendly competitive standpoint. I don't like Boston at all. And so I've been losing to them a lot. And that's part of the reason you have this dislike is in good fun, is that you're losing to them. So when we played them early in the season, and to see the fight that we showed, and to see Ant take his game to another level in that overtime, and to hit that flurry of shots in the OT. I think it was 8 straight points, and the last one had the building going bananas. Our director, Dave Dittman, had this great shot, cutaways of the fans, and Jordan Dye losing his mind. That was special to me, not just because Timberwolves beat Boston, but I just felt like it was foreshadowing, if you will. We all knew that Ant was special. We all knew that he takes his game to another level in the postseason. but there was just something about battling for that loose ball with Jason Tatum, getting a little bit chippy, winning the jump ball. We had a Mike Conley 3 and then Ant going off. It just really, for me, just set the stage for what we were getting ready to see the rest of the season, which ended up being another All-Star year and an All-NBA year, and really cementing himself as one of the bright superstars in the NBA. So that Boston game for me, as far as favorites, stands out the most.
Yeah. Jim?
There were a lot of, I'm just looking at the game log here, and the beginning of the season, losing to Toronto and then beating Miami at home and then losing to Atlanta, it was just a real head scratcher. And so now all of a sudden you're 1-2 and you're coming back home to play Denver, Utah, Boston, New Orleans, all at home, and all of those teams. It could have been a pretty tragic start of the season. And coming back and beating Miami was a pretty big deal. And we played really well in that game, held them to 90 points. Then losing to Atlanta, being up big, and losing was just crushing. We left Atlanta not knowing what was going to happen, Michael, right? It was not good.
It was not good.
It was
that felt like in the moment, it felt like, well, this is the same team from a year ago.
Yeah.
Soft at the end of games, no chemistry, no flow, right?
And then you come back home and you dismantle Denver. We beat them 110-89. And it was a complete dismantling of a fully constituted Denver team that was coming off a world championship. And it just felt super meaningful, then crushing Utah. But then the when that Michael's talking about beating Boston and Utah. And then I just felt like, man, this team can be really good. I felt they were going to be good. That's why those first two losses were so, they're head scratching, because there's no way you should lose to Toronto. And that's one of those places. And I've had to fill Michael in on a few of the places on the road where we haven't won for decades. And Toronto is one of them for some reason. It's Toronto and Boston are the two teams that we just cannot beat. So for me, it was that stretch to start the season, and then it was the 6-game road trip, and starting with Michael's call on the block with Ant, and then because you said something, Kyle, what's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. That 6-game road trip will, because of the block and the dunk. And, the win against the Clippers too, down 22, coming back to beat the Clippers in LA. We didn't do that game because it was on TNT, but I was driving between Palm Springs and Salt Lake City with my wife and my brother-in-law and his wife. I'll always remember that game because we were watching it on my phone in the car driving up to Utah. So anyway, that road trip I'll always remember.
Yeah. Those were two big inflection points too, because they go 1-2 right after that loss to the Hawks. They were outscored by 34 in the second half. And Phil, it's crazy to think that was this past season. That seemed like a decade ago, but it was a lot of fire Finch. And then they went on to win 19 of their next 22 games. And then that Indiana one, that was game 1, if I'm correct, after Karl's news about his injury. Yeah. So you're like, oh my God, here we go. And then for them to tough it out and to have that block and to win. And then that road trip was, I think they went 4-2 on the road trip. Really successful.
Cleveland was the Rudy Gobert.
Won that one. Could have won that one.
We should have won that game too. We should have won that game. And then it was the Laker loss. And then you're down 22 against the Clippers, and it's not looking good. And you don't have Karl-Anthony Towns, but then beating the Clippers and then winning those two games in Utah weren't because we didn't have. There were a lot of injuries in those two games, Michael. Right? Those two Utah games. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We didn't have a full strength team then either. So, those two Utah games were way more important than they should have been at the time. So,
those calls, by the way, Grady, were so good, and you've heard this from many people. But the block was awesome in the moment because it was game clinching, and you see a dude hit his head on the backboard. I feel for you, and you did it so well. But when he had the dunk, you wanted to go shirtless on the call, but you're also Ant's holding his hand and you're like, is he okay? So to be able to be that was the coolest thing I've ever seen, but also I hope the kid didn't break his hand. That would have been tough, but those are fun calls. Timberwolves clips, Phil, tweeted out basically every good moment of the season on video. So it's a good kind of go back through memory lane, but a lot of great calls and a lot of great moments. And again, you guys were at the forefront of all of them. So thanks for all you did this season.
Can we, since you brought up Anthony Edwards at the end, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I'd love to go down just like an Anthony Edwards side street for a second. So Nick Wright from Fox Sports 1 put out a tweet last week, and he credited the What's Right show graphics department for coming up with this great graphic for social media. Anthony Edwards is the 6th player ever to average 25 points a game, all NBA first or second team, and reach a conference finals, all in the same season before turning 23 years old. Here's the list. So again, it's 25 points a game, all NBA first or second team, and led your team to a conference finals before your 23rd birthday. Kobe, so Kobe in 01, LeBron James in 2007, Kevin Durant in 2011, Anthony Edwards this year, and then 2011 pre-knee injury Derrick Rose, and 2005 pre-knee injury Amari Stoudemire are the only 6 players to check those 3 boxes. I guess my question to you guys, we'll start with Grady again here, is do you think what's going to sharpen him more? Sitting on this loss and watching Luka Doncic basically just out Superman him? Or is it just the natural progression of getting to be 23, 24, going through the Olympic experience this summer? Like, what do you think is going to get him to take another leap? Like, what's your sort of pie chart of factors?
I think it's a combination. I think it's really all of the above. There is a natural progression. He's built different, as we've said before, because he has this competitive hunger and fire inside of him that just not every other player has. There's a lot of players out there who have talent, but that burning desire to succeed and then the willingness to put in the work to succeed. I mean, just this season alone, to see what Anthony Edwards looked like at the beginning of the season to how the year ended up, and his willingness to want to read the floor and the coaching staff and Conley helping him with that in terms of making the right read and making the right play. We saw a progression in that over the course of the regular season, which was really special. So the loss itself in the conference finals is something that's going to bother him. The understanding, I remember I had this conversation with our Steve Senior and Jason Kidd, who was saying, you kind of have to go through this. You have to go this far to understand what your body needs to feel like and look like in order to go further. And if it looked like these guys, hit a wall, well, for a lot of them, and many of them acknowledge, well, they did. And now there's a better understanding if they get, once they get in this position again, in terms of, okay, this is what this needs to fit. Kyrie's been there before. Luka Doncic has been to a Western Conference Finals before. So they already kind of had that understanding where a lot of the Timberwolves players were experiencing that for the first time, including Anthony Edwards. So from just a conditioning physicality standpoint, we'll see a different Anthony Edwards come next postseason. And I really do feel like this experience with Team USA is going to be could be a difference maker as well. And last season he's around Jalen Brunson, Brandon Ingram, guys like Mikal Bridges, talented guys. But he's going to go into this training camp and go into Paris with Steph Curry, LeBron James, his idol Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum. We're talking about all-time greats that he's going to be around in the workout room, on the practice court, day in and day out. And you really have to believe that he's going to take, if he took something from last summer, because I do think that Olympic experience, that FIBA World Cup experience wasn't talked about enough in terms of how it impacted him and got him off to a great start, beginning with training camp. I think it's going to make a big difference for him this upcoming season, being around all those greats. So I think you take all those things into consideration: natural maturation as a player, the loss, the hunger to want to be great, and then the experience with the Olympics. I think he's going to take his game to another level for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that playing for your country, everybody that talks about that's done it, and obviously I've been around some of the players. I know Kevin Garnett was different when he came back after winning the gold medal. And then being around Cheryl Reeve and all the Lynx players that I know that have, gone in and played for their country, and they say how meaningful it is for them. And, and the NBA players are a little bit different. I mean, and also the WNBA players too, that played for Team USA, they're a little bit different because they get kind of sequestered away in sort of different sort of housing situations. I know at least the last few Olympics they have, 1 year, I think when they were down in Brazil, they got to stay on like a ocean liner or whatever. They stayed on, both men and women, they got to stay in like these super swanky, sort of, instead of like Olympic Village or whatever. So they do get a little bit of a different treatment. But the other thing too is that I think that Chris Finch is also the right coach for Ant. And I think because like so many times do we hear that players that play deep into the playoffs and then have to go into the Olympics and have to do that grind, there's a built-in excuse for them the next season coming in that they're going to be exhausted starting the season. Like, I just don't think Ant's going to let himself go there. I don't think Chris Finch is going to feed into that either, because I think people are going to bring that up, and it'll be interesting to see how fast that gets shot down next season.
Yeah.
We want to respect your time and send you off on your summer vacation. I was going to ask for like who you're cheering for in the finals, but I'm pretty sure I know Grady who he's not cheering for.
So anybody but Boston, it seems.
Yeah, we're good there. But this is a lifestyle podcast, and again, you have been a big part of mine and Phil's and the fans' lifestyle. So just summer plans. What's on the docket for this summer? I know Grady, you're calling some Liberty games, but just what are you looking forward to for your summer and this off season?
Stamping passports, trying to get away and get some R&R for sure. And then I love the fact that I'll be able to do some W as a just a special place in my heart, just like I know it does with Jim. And some of the conversations this week on national television have been driving me crazy. But I just have so much love for the W, and so I'm excited to be able to call games, and also to be able to. I always feel like Jim mentioned the 5 months, and then you come back from the 5 months, and then you kind of have to knock the rust off a little bit as you get back in the rhythm of things. So I love the fact that I can kind of break up the summer a little bit, sneak in some games. So come preseason, I won't be as rusty. So we love the game, and so it won't be so much that'll be overwhelming, but it'll be just enough to get my feet wet to try to stay sharp. So I'm looking forward to. On one hand, I want it to be a quick 5 months, and on the other hand, it's like, you know what, I want to enjoy it so I can be as sharp as possible when Jim and I get going again.
Grady bringing up the conversations that have been taking place this week about the WNBA, and then a siren going off in the background was perfect.
It's Wednesday, man. It's Wednesday at 1 o'clock. It's when the emergency.
It's when the hot take sirens start going off.
Oh, that's
Jim, what do you got going on this summer?
You know what? I'm really committed to working on my health and flexibility, and it's something that it's interesting when you get older what happens to your body, because when you play in the NBA, you think you're never gonna, some of that stuff doesn't apply to you, in terms of getting older, but it does. Let me tell you, it comes into play. So my wife and I, man, we've been like doing good. Like, we've been working out every day. I told Phil when we first jumped on here, like, what have you been doing? I said, I've been working out every day, man. I've been getting after it, getting our walk in, but mainly working on flexibility training. Because, when you lose mobility, like if you lose your mobility, you lose your athleticism. And when you lose your athleticism, it just, life is just different. So when you want to be active like I do, it's really I think there's all these different ways, and we're using the Peloton app right now, which is so cool. It's not just the bike. I mean, there's so many things you can do.
It's great.
All the workouts that you can do. So it's like a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle podcast.
Yeah.
Who's your Jim? Give us your top 3 power rankings. Who do you ride with? Who are your top 3 Peloton instructors?
Ali Love,
Dennis Morton.
Michael and I talked to. I don't really do the names. Like, I don't really have all the names. I only really know one instructor on Peloton, like by name, really, and that's Ali Love, because she was the in-arena host in Brooklyn. Yeah. She's no longer doing that. And my wife just adored riding with Ali Love, because she'd get shout outs, all the time. It's fun to get the shout out. No,
Alex Toussaint will ruin your day if you let
Alex
him, man.
Toussaint,
He will.
he's bad. You know, if you threw the names at me, I'd probably get him. But anyway, it's just fun. And then I'm just gonna try to lower my handicap again, man. I'm gonna try to,
Let's get it.
So, and Kyle, I'm really disappointed. I had a golfer's elbow when Kyle was here. We didn't get out to my country club, but Kyle, we're gonna do it, man. You got to come back to Minnesota this summer. Will you come back?
Dude, I will fly back just to golf, like for an afternoon. So yeah, no, get that elbow fixed, and I'll be back.
All right, man. It's
Awesome,
been a lot
man.
of fun, Phil and Kyle. Thanks for having us on too.
Yeah, thank you.
Grady, Grady doesn't just jump on with anybody. That's for sure. That's why, and neither would I. I don't either. Like, I would not do this with a lot of people. And you guys have created quite the brand. And Phil, we've been friends for a long time. So we're happy to be here with you guys and happy to be chatting with everybody that's in this Timberwolves community too.
Yeah, I think just like Wolves fans, well, they obviously love hearing you guys call the games. I think they love hearing you in this format too, and just expressing your opinions with t-shirts on and kicking around with two idiots like me and Kyle. By the way, in a different lifetime, it's funny. I was searching through. So Score North turned 5 years old. We built it sort of. We sunsetted 1500 ESPN and knew that we had to move into finding younger audiences and building something for the future. And this is like back 5.5 years ago. And I was making lists with some help from other people in the industry of who should we hire to build something digital, podcast, YouTube, whatever it may be. And even like hosts who might be outside the market that could come in here. And I swear to God, last week, I opened an email from it's a person in the business who has been super helpful that a bunch of us know. And Michael Grady's name was on a list in 2018, 2019 for, hey, if you're looking outside Minneapolis market, fast risers in media to keep an eye on. And I think you maybe you took the Brooklyn job somewhere in like 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And you took that job and like we just before even reaching out to you, we crossed you off the list. But I literally saw that in an email that I was searching for something else last week and I forgot to bring it up to you. But in a different universe, it could be Kyle, Phil, and Michael Grady slinging hot takes on podcasts.
I think Grady made the right decision.
Everything works out the way it's supposed to. Here we are together, all on Score North. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for your awesome work, your coverage, and just everything you've done for Timberwolves fans and your work on Flagrant Howls. We love you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, sir.
I'll see you later, Michael.
We'll see you tonight, brother.
Okay.
Send some pictures of dinner to those of you. All right, Jim, Pete, and Grady. We'll keep it here for just a few minutes to I don't know, put a bow on the season here because you went like 4 days in New Orleans. In fact, you watched the end of the series in New Orleans.
In what I would deem was, well, you know what? This is it. I don't really. Again, I think after this, I'm going to take some time off. I always try to do content year by year. I'm not really sure what my plan is for next season yet, but I know I don't want to do this for a couple weeks. My house has no furniture and I close in a month, but I will just get this short and sweet because I've ranted about it before. But boy, does the Airbnb industry suck. Just the worst. I'm currently in litigation with them, I think.
What?
Walked in Friday to check into an Airbnb down in the south, and the pool was as green as the football field in your background. And then it rained in New Orleans, and then multiple parts of our ceiling were leaking, including onto the bed. So accommodations were low, but
this is for like everyone in the group was supposed to stay here.
Yeah, all 10 dudes for a bachelor party. So
did you spend a night there?
We spent 1.5 nights there, and we did move out, and we're trying to get a bunch of money back, but New Orleans, 10 out of 10 would recommend Cafe Du Monde with the best treats and coffee on planet Earth. The Carousel Bar, Bourbon Street was its own. I don't think, Phil, I've ever stayed up to 5 a.m. 3 nights in a row in my life, even when I was at my peak in college, but paying for it now. But yeah, it was fun, and it was a fun way. It was a sad way last Thursday when I did my final pod with Dane, but I just watched that game in my hotel room, and it was, again, not a good game. They got spanked up and down, but I was able to kind of think about all weekend how much fun it's been doing this with you and doing Dane's show and having Grady and Jim on. It's those little things that bring me back to keep saying that this was the best season in Timberwolves history for me, because I think when the 03-04 team was doing what they were doing, you didn't have that sense of community as much. You didn't, you didn't
couldn't,
interact with
pre-social
people.
media.
Yeah, like I said, it was MySpace back then, right? So
Barely.
This has been a really, really awesome season for me as a fan and also someone who tries to contribute content. And a lot of thanks and appreciation go to you specifically for really turning up the dial on how much Score covers Timberwolves basketball. And, why cover it when it was bad? Like, now they're good and they deserve more coverage, and you really fill the void. So on behalf of a lot of fans, I thank you and Judd and everyone and artists and everyone else that's contributed to this show, because it's been an awesome year.
Well, you remain I call you to your face and to other people like the Pied Piper of Timberwolves fans. I mean, you are the smartest, most plugged in fan / media member, and you walk that line so perfectly on this podcast and Dane's, and when you decide to rifle off tweets after games, not during, but after games.
Yeah.
It's been awesome, man. I mean, this podcast, Flagrant Howls, is less than 2 years old, and to see Wolves fans just flock to it during the playoff run and inexplicably push it and Dane's podcast into the top 10 among all basketball podcasts in the country. It's just, man, like at one point in the playoffs, in the top 15 basketball podcasts in the country on Apple, not even counting like YouTube and Spotify.
Yeah, I think we got to 7th. I mean, that's crazy. Like,
7th, but like Dane is constantly up right there, and Kevin Garnett representing. And then I think Locked On Wolves was also like in the mid. There was like 3 Wolves podcasts and then a legendary former Wolves player. So I guess my point here is it is the state of hockey by name, but this is a white hot basketball market, and people have just been starved for a product to get behind. And when you give them a 50-win basketball team and an energizing, enigmatic in a good way superstar in Anthony Edwards to get behind, people support, man. Like, people show up, and you can take the stupid tarps off the upper deck and you can throw block parties. So I mean what I said with Jim Pete and Michael Grady. Like, I do feel like, as much of a buzzkill as the very end of the season was, I do feel like this is the beginning of something long-term and awesome. I don't think Anthony Edwards has eyes for other cities at this point. Like, I don't think you have to worry about that for a long time. So I'm excited for what this season represents going forward here. I feel like we've entered a really fun long-term era of Timberwolves basketball.
And it's not going to get less interesting, right? Like, I know Grady mentioned the Tim thing. That was the news yesterday, that Tim Conley, essentially, they reworked a deal. So he will be the president of basketball operations for the Wolves this next season. Kind of kicked that opt-out down the road for a year. That opt-out has always been described to me as kind of like a Glen Taylor opt-out. So what he probably wants to do now is just wait and see how this ownership thing settles. From my understanding, I think maybe arbitration like in September. So I don't think it's going to be quick. But again, that's probably why Tim is like, you know what? Let me just push it back a year. I got things to do. I got drafts and free agents and all this stuff to figure out. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason. It could be very exciting. There could be big moves. There could be little moves. But I mean, Dane always talks about how it was kind of, you watched Wolves games in the past in your basement, and now you look back, in the month of May for me, I spent as much time at breweries doing live shows as I did in my apartment out here in Portland. So I think it's okay to be a Wolves fan. I think it's fun to be a Timberwolves fan, and all the stuff you talked about with all those different pods being in the rankings. I think to me, in how my brain works, it says way more about the people that listen to it and support those shows than the actual shows themselves. And again, Timberwolves fans are, I will go to my grave saying this, like, the best. You might not always see eye to eye with certain people or a take or a belief, but when, I think back to that Karl article that I think has since been removed online or whatever, but you come at us.
Did that get taken down?
Well, I don't know. There's been, I haven't gone on Twitter in a while, but
it's a weird article, man.
Weird article, but it was in the moment. I think back to our 8 Mile thing again, is like, we might all have differing opinions of how much Luka Garza should play or not play, But when you come at one of us, we all band together. And that's what makes Wolves Twitter and this fan base and this community so great. So it really has meant a lot to me. And I've showed my raw emotions and, my real emotions all season. But it's been a great season. I think it's a well-deserved couple weeks off here. Like Jim said, you're used to your kind of Wolvesy calendar being done around mid-April, and then you just kind of punt on them for 6 weeks. Maybe check out some water balls.
Ping pong night is a good fun night usually.
Yeah, that's a good night to kind of like bring the crew back together. But now it's different. That's kind of been my saying about this team all year. Is this team is different, and now it's June 5th and a couple weeks, and it's the draft, and it's free agency, and then it's summer league, and then it's extended Team USA camp with Ant, and it's just going to take you right up until the season again next year. So enjoy a week or two off, but the Wolves content I'm sure will continue to flow at a rapid speed this summer. But it's important to me, and like I always say, to be where your feet are, to take a moment and thank you, thank Jim, thank Grady, thank Score North, and then thank the fans for all the support and supporting the sponsors. Because without all of that, I don't know what I'm doing. So
yeah. And speaking of, just a shout out to our friends at EcoFun real quick here, your summertime fun headquarters. In fact, on the YouTube channel, you see a warehouse full of fun things to ride: scooters, motorcycles, ATVs, side-by-sides, golf carts. We've been threatening to get Judd in like a golf cart with spinner rims on it or something. Kind of fun.
I want to buy a golf cart for my new house.
Golf carts are, my dad used to live in a retirement community in Surprise, Arizona. Like everyone had little golf carts. And I was like, Dad, why don't you? He's like, I like to walk. I'm like, yeah, but they have these sweet tricked out golf carts. All sorts of fun stuff at EcoFun Motorsports. And for your summertime fun on the water, you can visit the Forest Lake location, which has 2024 Kawasaki and Yamaha watercraft. It's at ecofunmotorsports.com, Forest Lake and Burnsville, ecofunmotorsports.com. All right, man. Well, you're going to literally go get your house in order over the next couple weeks.
Yeah.
The Timberwolves are going to get their figurative house in order. And there's a bunch of big conversations to be had like later on this month as we look toward, because free agency is in like a month.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wolves have to make some luxury tax line decisions. There is a Karl-Anthony Towns discussion to be had. I mean, even he sort of felt it at his postseason press conference where he was saying, I hope I'm back. I want to be part of this. But at the very least, if you did very little and just sort of ran it back mostly intact, it's probably still a 50-win team. There's a bunch of teams in the Western Conference. Denver's not going to go away quietly with a 28-year-old three-time MVP. Dallas, Phoenix, they got to figure out what they're doing here too. The Lakers with maybe JJ Redick and LeBron James coming back. So, I mean, there's so many fun discussions, Kyle, to be had just looking ahead once the finals are officially a wrap.
And that's why, again, we've kind of just parsed over it multiple times now, and it did kind of just flow through the timeline last night in and out. But that Tim Conley news might be the biggest news of the whole offseason. Trades, no trades, whatever, because the ownership thing is not settled. And I think Tim probably prefers to work for one set of owners and not the other. And his willingness, he's getting paid really well, and I'm sure he got a nice bump, but to just get that out of the way now, because there's a trickle down effect to it's not just Tim Conley. It's all, the Athletic reported yesterday that I think Matt Lloyd, who is an integral part of what they do in that front office, kind of turned down more money to do a role with the Hornets earlier this spring. So, if you have chaos at the top of your organization, then it kind of trickles down. And I think Tim saying, I'm here, I'm not looking anywhere else. That'll be a big step into, like you said, trades, transactions, signings, whatever they have to do. It's going to be, I was telling Dane, I pity like bad teams now, which sounds so champagne problems, but like if
you're two years of this and you're all on your high horse looking down at the Hornets of the NBA.
I had a beignet and all of a sudden I'm just like classy and sophisticated. Because if you're a Hornets fan, you get excited for the draft and a lot of your own stuff, but you don't really know what you have. You don't know what you have. You don't know what you don't have, because you really don't learn those things until you make a run. I mean, Grady said Jason Kidd told him you got to go through losses and Western Conference Finals runs before you can kind of break that bubble into the finals. So the Wolves have done that. So they still have a list of questions, but the questions are more specific.
Yeah.
And I think equally as important, but probably easier to also answer than rebuilding teams that, the Wolves have done that for 2 decades. You just don't know what you have. The Wolves know what they have now, at least in a core group of their guys. And now it's on Tim Connelly, who's here, and his staff to figure out how do they either run it back with some different sprinkles or, really redo one of the rooms in the house to make it more valuable. It's going to be a fun summer.
My final thought here, just on the Connolly ownership stuff. I'm glad. I'm sure he got some sort of. I don't know if he got the $15 million bump.
No, but
Shams floated.
Pretty sure he got a bump.
To even like contractually agree to move the opt out to next year, you probably get a bump. So he goes from like $4 million with the Nuggets less than 2 years ago, to $8 million to probably something over 10 to maybe headed his way toward like 15 next year. But my final thought on this podcast is, Glen Taylor, please step aside. I know what door number 1 looks like. I know what 30 years of Glen Taylor looks like. And when Flip Saunders or Tim Connelly don't have their hand on the wheel, this franchise is an embarrassing train wreck. And Glen Taylor has been one of the worst 4 major sports leagues owners in the last 30 to 35 years of NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB. And I know that there's always risk in door number 2. Mark and Alex, they're coming in, they're outsiders. Do they have the money for this, for that? I don't care what those risks are. I know what door number 1 is, and I'm sick of it. I'm done with it, and I'm willing to take on whatever risk as a podcast host, as a fan. Like, I don't really have to take on much at all, but like, I'm just ready for the Glen Taylor era to be over. It's so ridiculous that before 2 of the biggest games of the season against the Nuggets, we get Glen Taylor bombshell news coming out that rocks the boat. And then during one of the biggest off seasons, last year maybe being, the last couple of years were big, but like, this is maybe the biggest offseason because you have to make some big decisions for a team that's ready to take the step into title contention. And we have litigation spilling over into September, overlapping the entire free agent and trade period. So I'm done. I want off the ride. I don't know if the Mark and Alex ride is going to be smooth sailing either, but I'm just willing to take a chance on it at this point. So Glenn, thank you for not moving the Timberwolves back in 1995, I guess, even though the NBA would love to have teams in all the top 15 markets in the league. So I think we probably go too far.
That one always bugs me, right? Like
he kept the team here 30 years. Thank you. That's great.
I mean, my therapist might be like, actually, that was a worse thing for you in your last 20 years of mental health than it was a benefit. But he did keep the team here. And then you acknowledge that and you add that to the resume or the Wikipedia. But there's just too many things. This podcast is kind of eerily timed with new ownership and the Tim Connelly era. This podcast, I don't think would have been the 7th best podcast if it was all Glen Taylor, because again, things we've now learned that he didn't think Tim Connelly would come. He didn't, a big Rudy Gobert trade, extending all the coaches.
Yesterday on the Scoop, Doogie reported literally, and he's getting this source very close to Glenn, if you want to characterize it that way. The Glen Taylor has at best a lukewarm relationship with Tim Connelly. Why? Why do you only have a lukewarm relationship with the architect of this current roster? Maybe build a better relationship with the guy that has. I mean, it doesn't make it. None of it makes sense to me. So I'm ready to get off the ride.
I'm gonna wake. If he listens to podcasts, I'm gonna wake up one day just glued to a chicken coop. He's gonna come after me. No, and I've heard that too. Again, that's why I've said that I'm never gonna be a reporter, but it's a Glen Taylor opt out clause in that Tim Connelly contract. So I think Tim probably got a little extra on the top, but then it was a selfless move to be like, hey, and Tim Connelly, once he's gotten here, I know his family loves it. He is, just an awesome executive, but you've seen him too during this playoff run when he's behind the scenes and his relationships with everyone in that organization. He's a guy you want to work for. So if the old establishment doesn't have a very good relationship with him, and I think back too to like, whatever. But, there's all those rumors about Game 5 and Kevin Garnett coming in and stuff. And then all of a sudden he's just not there. And it makes you wonder, like, is that a Glenn thing? Like, I don't know, but just it's time for this organization that has flirted with being more modern and more sophisticated. And they're doing little things behind the scenes. They're doing big things publicly to embrace that, because that stuff, no matter what you think, it actually does affect morale. The Minnesota Timberwolves are your favorite basketball team, but they are just an organization, just like the one that you work for, that has drama and politics and hierarchy and positions and people wanting more money and people having issues. And Tim Connolly is the perfect man to mitigate all of those things in his staff. So I'm glad that took place yesterday and has been kind of cleaned up. Ownership will resolve itself probably this summer, early fall. And then we got to kind of tweak the roster and figure out, is this roster able to win another series against a Mavs team with an athletic front court and two really good guards, or do you need to pivot a little bit? So it's going to be awesome, man. It's going to be a really, really interesting, exciting summer. And I'm excited to talk about it, but not this week and not next week.
Amen. Amen. Judd and I will hit you guys with at least 1 or 2 episodes here and there over the next couple weeks, just kind of diving into some of the initial offseason blueprint speculation and
Viking OTAs. Let's go.
Viking mandatory mini camp now. Okay.
Okay.
This is mandatory stuff here this week.
I'm excited.
So yeah, check out Purple Daily. And we'll catch you guys down the road here on your favorite Timberwolves lifestyle podcast, Flagrant Howls.